Good evening, Hari Om. Welcome everyone to a very interesting discussion this evening on a chapter from Jankiji's book, How Do You Know What You Know? The chapter is very interestingly titled, Why Do Smart People Do Dumb Things? And to lead this discussion, we have very eminent panelists joining us. First of which is R. Gopalakrishnan. Gopal to his friends. He has generously inducted us into that group, and we can refer to him as Gopal. Gopal has seen some of the biggest leaders in India in his capacity at two of the finest firms, Unilever, or as it used to be known in those days, Hindustan Unilever and Tata Sons. So, from a corporate point of view, he is the best equipped to talk about why some of the smartest people do dumb things. He's also a board member at firms, Indian firms, promoter led firms, and multinational firms. So, in his gamut of work, he's seen the entire plethora of leaders in the Indian corporate space. He's also an author himself, 9 books and counting, if I got that right. And one of his books specifically talks about the crash of leaders. So we're looking forward to him interviewing Jankiji on this chapter from her book and taking the discussion forward. Dr. Janki Santok, or Jankiji as she's known to her students, has been a student of the subject of Vedanta and now a teacher for the past 3 decades. She was a part of the first batch of the Vedanta Academy under Swami Parthasarthi. Since then, her service takes multiple forms. She conducts classes. There used to be physical classes in Mumbai, and since the pandemic, all the classes have moved online. So her students are now from around the world. She is also a public speaker. She is a corporate resource as a trainer, and most recently an author of the book, How Do You Know What You Know? We are going to talk about ways and means to stay connected with her and through this knowledge at the end of this invigorating discussion. Just a quick note, we want to make this as interactive as possible, and we have time for question and answers. So welcome to everyone who's joining us on YouTube and on Facebook. You can ask questions by inserting them in the comments, and we'll try our best to address them. Without further ado, I would want to hand it over to Gopal to take the discussion forward today with Jankiji. Thank you.
Thank you, Deepak. Am I audible? Am my voice is clear? Thank you. Namaste, Jankiji. All clear?
Yes, all clear.
Okay, are likely to have a delightful and promising conversation, not only for ourselves, Jankiji, but also for those who are viewers on this program. And the subject is a very practical one. Why do smart people do dumb things? And you're a Vedanta scholar. You come from the school of philosophy. And so clearly you have an interest, and if you've written a book, you have the expertise on this subject. You thought about it a lot. And this, as Deepak mentioned, is inspired the title of this one by chapter 7 of your book. So you come from a philosophical searchlight. I come from the practical world. I've spent 53 years doing dumb things while deluding myself that I'm a very smart guy. And now at my age, I can sit back and say, wow, how dumb I was. But more interestingly, I've seen a lot of other smart people do dumb things. My bosses, my subordinates, my peers. So this is not a disease that is peculiar to one or the other, though we tend to talk of it as though it is somebody else's problem. It's a problem all of us have. I mean, this is something to do with human beings. So I come from the perspective of practical human psychology. And I've also authored a book, as mentioned by Deepak, which has caused me to look at it from the point of view of psychology and neuroscience. And of course, I'm very far away from the world of philosophy. Now, many people think that philosophy is esoteric and up in the realms of great minds, and that we live a common life, and these common problems and philosophy have no great linkage. And what I would like to do in the next half an hour, which is the time given to us, is to make a solid connection, a fiber optic connection between the practical aspects of Vedanta and the solutions available for people to think about. I mean, you're not a homeopath who's going to give medicines, but you can give people a way to think about it. So I hope that that would be a good outcome, the marriage of philosophy with practical problems of life. And we have chosen one of the most practical problems of leadership. A lot of dumb things are getting done. It's being done right now. Tomorrow morning you read about it in the newspaper. So that's the way we will go about it. I would make a few opening remarks and then ask you to make your responses and remarks to whatever I'm about to say. You know, one of the things that has struck me is I'm really intrigued, I'm puzzled that power renders a leader challenged. It does something to the brain. The brain is a very plastic thing from whatever little I have studied. And it makes the person behave differently. Power afflicts the brain in some ways. And I've discussed all that in my book, and my book is not the subject of the discussion. But the interesting thing I have observed is that if you're physically challenged in some way because of an injury or something natural, you are aware of it, and those who are in touch with you are aware of it. They can see that you have a little pain or limp or you're squinting your eyes. But when you're mentally challenged, it's not visible. Not only to the observer, it is not visible to the person also. So I have had experiences where somebody who worked for me 35 years ago comes and says, you know, that particular episode, I was feeling very hurt after you told me what you told me. And I'm ashamed to say I don't even remember that episode. But it's left it strong enough in his mind or her mind to feel hurt about it and recount it after 35 years. So it's a very peculiar form of affliction that happens to the brain. And there was a movie, I don't know if you've seen it, in 2015, made by Pixar. And it was called Inside Out. It's about a young girl. I'm not going to go into the movie because that's not the subject of our discussion, because it's leading into the question that I want you to kindly address. It is about a young girl and her parents who moved the city from city 1 to city 2 in the United States. There are lots of adjustment that they had to do. And the peculiar behavior of that girl, she was 10, 11, 12 years old, was interpreted in psychological terms. That it's a product of 5 emotions that affect human behavior. 5 emotions. Joy, sadness, anger, fear, and disgust. And where do they think of these 5 emotions? There is a very well-known psychology professor called Professor Dacher Keltner, who guided the producer of the film. Now, why am I saying all this? Because I told you I come from a little study background of psychology and practical human behavior. But when I think about the behavior of Duryodhana in the Mahabharata, he looks like a brain-challenged person. Now, I'm bringing in Duryodhana because there's no point bringing in some CEO from America or India because that terrain may not be familiar to you. But Duryodhana, everybody in this audience will know about Duryodhana and his behavior. How do you interpret this from the perspective of your book and your thinking on the subject? The brain damage to a leader. Over to you.
Yeah. Okay. So, yes, this is an interesting phenomenon that takes place because all of us have a multitude of desires. And these desires, when we fulfill these desires, when we get whatever we want, lots of things happen to these desires. We have desires, and if we don't get what we want, then it starts boiling in us as anger. So anger is nothing but a modification of desire. Every time our desire gets interrupted, we get angry. That's why control of anger really is control of the originating desire. then suppose our desire was not interrupted, we actually got what we wanted, then that brings about greed. And even if our greed, like we want more and more, and even if that gets fulfilled, then we start becoming very arrogant towards those who don't have that thing, whatever we have accomplished. So, this is the state that a person who's an achiever reaches. He becomes arrogant towards those who have accomplished less than him. He also is equally envious towards those who have more. That's why you have people who talk like this. You say, oh, he has got 3 Mercedes. And you say, naturally, he is the son-in-law of a minister. So that shows the envy in the person, that you never attribute him to having done hard work. I have got my Merc because I was a hard worker. I'm bright, but you have got yours because, you just did all this not so right things. So these desires, what they do is they modify into these negative emotions. And the negative emotions plus the desires are playing in the mind so much that the mind gets very agitated. And when the mind gets so agitated, the intellect simply can't think. You see this everywhere. The mind is getting agitated. It's even in the pressures of sport. A person is playing in the 90s and he's doing very well. But he comes to the 90s in cricket, he comes to the 90s and then he starts making mistakes because that 100 is looming in his head. The mind is getting agitated. As the mind keeps getting agitated because of all these desires, having all this turmoil within us, our capacity of discrimination starts, what should I say, starts diminishing. We can't think straight when we are that agitated. And that's why you see these people start doing really strange things sometimes. You'd say, why? He's so smart. Why is he doing something so silly? I mean, I can tell that he shouldn't be doing this. Why can't he tell? How can it be that a person who's slated to be president of a country is caught in a hotel, with some dalliance? How is this possible? How is it possible that a that the governor of a state is caught? I mean, you, even if you're going to do stupid things, at least you have the brains to not let the press know about it. So, like, how can you be so stupid? What is happening is the mind is getting agitated with this whole tumult of desires and their modifications, the emotions, and then it just loses. You can be the top of the corporate ladder. You can be the poster boy of Indian corporate globally, and you can make one bad call, and next thing you're in jail. Now, all this stuff is very, very. It seems funny to us. It seems funny to us that can't Duryodhana get it? Like, even see that incident. Krishna says, "You can have me, or you can have my army." Clearly, he should have Krishna, because if the Pandavas didn't have Krishna, they can't win the war. The Pandavas are good people, but without the leadership of Krishna, they aren't going to win. So clearly, he has to take Krishna and not the armies, because he has already enough army, but he doesn't. And the only thing that the Pandavas have is Krishna. So clearly, he should have taken it. In fact, when he goes home after having made that choice, I don't know if everybody's familiar, because this is sort of, anyone in the world can be hearing us now, but there's a famous incident in the Mahabharata where Duryodhana and Arjuna both approach, these are two cousins, and they're about to go into war, and they both approach Krishna, who's a real mastermind, and say, help us. So he says, look, you both are dear to me. So what I will do is I'll give one of you my army, and the other one, I will come unarmed. This is Krishna's response. So Arjuna is very humble. He says, Krishna, whatever it is, I want you. And Duryodhana says, oh, this mad Arjuna, I took one single man. I'll get the entire army of Krishna. What fun. And then he goes back and he tells Shakuni Mama, his uncle, that stupid Arjuna, he chose Krishna. And I got the entire Yadava army. He was so excited. And Shakuni Mama tells Duryodhana, son, you just lost the war. So it's so obvious that without Krishna, Pandavas cannot win. So if he was a good chess player, he would take Krishna with him. But he didn't. He made a stupid mistake, and that cost him his kingdom, it cost him his life, it cost him everything. It cost him history, it cost him everything. Similarly, Hitler, what did he do? He went and attacked at Russia. It's like, aren't you thinking, like, what were you thinking? But these people can't, because the mind is so full of these tumultuous self-centered desires that the mind is so agitated. Intellect cannot function. So that's the story.
Lovely answer. If I may just follow on from what you just explained, and I'm not putting words into your mouth, but I'm just being a bit interactive, and so that we also enjoy our session to explore this. I refer to that film called Inside Out, and I refer to a Professor Dacher Kaltner, who was the psychology expert who worked with them. And I just want to read out a line that Dacher Kaltner said. It's just a small line. He said, we gain a capacity to make a difference to the world by enhancing the lives of others. But the very experience of having power and privilege, leads us to believe in our bad moments like impulsive, out of control sociopaths. He uses the word sociopath, which is in common parlance quite a tough word for a brain diseased person. And so I want to lead on from the story you told about Duryodhana and choosing to have the whole Yadav army. It would appear that a powerful person is not in full command of his senses. And I was very interested to read that in chapter 7, you refer to the intellect and the mind. Now, since everybody here may not have read the book, if I may take the liberty of saying, the intellect is a seat of rational, analytical, logical thought in your book, as you stated. And the mind is the seat of emotional whims and fancies, likes and dislikes. What in psychology they call left brain and right brain, approximately. I don't want to get into technical definitions of left and right brain, but approximately. Now, what is it if a person is a leader and he doesn't have full control of his left brain because the right brain has taken over? Emotion, ego, greed, jealousy, all the things that you mentioned. Then he is not in command of his faculties. Would you think that if he commits an error, he is not to blame? I mean, it's now bordering on an ethical question. I committed this murder or I committed this act because I was in the middle of that brain damage or brain diseased or brain stress, whatever you want to call it. And, I'm really not responsible for shooting that person. How would you interpret it?
It all depends on the level, because even our legal system and even in jurisprudence, we know that if a person for some reason has got into a blinding rage and has, sort of lost to the point that he's lost his senses, then he can plead temporary insanity. So yes, that is a possibility. However, it would be better if we took responsibility for our actions instead of just writing it off as, I was in that position. And actually, we have to understand also, we put ourselves there, right? You put yourself in that position. It is not necessary that all power corrupts. It is that power corrupts some people some of the time. So what is the difference? Look at like somebody like J.R.D. Tata, for instance. Power hasn't corrupted him. In fact, he sets up an airline. Okay, he does everything. It was his idea. He set it up. He was passionate about it. And the government tells him, well, we're just taking it over. And he's like, what can he do? He just lost his, like his precious baby, as it were. And he's managing, right? He didn't do anything very untoward because of it. So you find that there are some leaders who have got all this huge power, but they don't seem to have lost their head. So what is that one thing that is making the difference between these people who do lose their head with power and those who don't? And the possible Vedantic answer for that is your degree of unselfishness. Okay, how much do you really care? How much does the cause matter to you? Because at some point, you become more important than the cause. And when that happens, then that's when the sort of all hell breaks loose. But if you have stayed focused on the cause that you originally built up, you built up your company with a certain vision, with a certain purpose. The point of doing these great things is that we forget ourselves, that we lose our ego, that we can dissolve ourselves in something greater and vaster and nobler than us. And these people do it. But when their level comes up and meets that, and they no longer push their level up any further, their vision cannot expand any further, then that's when all these problems come. Otherwise, Rama had complete power. He was the monarch. But there was no abuse of power. In fact, he made the greatest sacrifice for his country. He gave up his wife and unborn children, which is shown as the greatest sacrifice. Of course, feminists argue that this is a really bad thing, on for no rhyme or reason he sent her out. But they're not getting the point, the moral of the story, as it were. Mythology is told to teach a lesson, and the lesson over here is a good leader will give up the thing that he loves the most for the sake of his cause, for the sake of his country. That's the lesson we have to get out of here. We don't have to get the lesson of how a husband should treat his wife. That would be incorrect. But this capacity to put ourselves less than the cause that we are working for is what allows the human personality to grow, to take on more and more powerful roles, and still not get the mind polluted. Because really, the more powerful you are, the more capable you are of helping people. What a wonderful opportunity. Why lose it? So if we
Wonderful.
have
You have a very, very engaging answer to the question. But if I might put it into an algorithm, into a mathematical formula, you're saying when you're concerned for yourself, crosses the Lakshman Rekha of the concern for the organization or the community or the society, then you enter danger zone. And the more the difference, the worse it is. Is that a fair summary?
fantastic, yes.
Now, everybody understands this on a Saturday evening at 6 o'clock, coming as it is from a learned Vedantic scholar. But I know I wasn't around during Mahabharata, and neither were you. How would you explain the behavior of Bhishma and Vidur in the court of the Kauravas? They were very enlightened people, very wonderful people. They were pretty ego-less people, as the story goes. But when Draupadi was being disrobed, they kept quiet. How would you explain that? Did their personal ego take better control of them? Or what happened according to, if there's an answer? I mean, these are complex questions and I'm not fair in expecting you to answer it in 3-4 minutes. But if you have a point of view, I think our audience would be enlightened to know that this is very practical philosophy. That's why I'm asking the question.
Okay, so for that, we really have to begin by a simple comprehension of the role of mythology. The role of mythology is to teach us something, to give us some ideas. Not everybody likes a philosophical approach to things. So we explain that philosophy with the help of a story, and then people get it. So now what is being portrayed in that particular case is that society had reached its very bottommost point. I mean, it was so low that it cannot happen in today's society. Imagine a respectable lady being disrobed in parliament. In parliament, will that ever happen? It can't happen today. So the moral of that incident is always to show the very nadir that it has reached, the lowest point society had reached. And because it had reached that point, is now a war going to happen? Okay, so that is where it's coming from, where even the good people have been shut up, just like today we all have been shut up, right? Many times we see something wrong, we don't say it, we don't stand up for it. There are, I'm ashamed to say this is happening in my country, that people are taking videos of torturing other people because they don't agree with their views. They're taking the video. Not only it's not taken hidden, he actually moves so that his face and what he's doing is clearly visible. This is shameful. This is not Bharat. This is not our country, right? How many of us are getting up and saying this is wrong, it should not happen? And with the due processes of the law, he must get the same treatment that he has meted out like this to somebody. Not by the rule of the mob, but by the jurisprudence, by the proper way. You must get that. Now, how many of us are saying it? And nobody of us is going to say anything. We are all good people. We are all going to keep quiet. And then the stature of our society will simply go down and down and down. And that's, what is popularly known in our country, yada yada dharmasya glanir bharata. Whenever dharma falls so much, then I will come. I will come means one person will wake up and say, is this madness going on? Like, let's get this done. So it's not like some Lord is going to come. We have to take the onus on ourselves and do it. But that incident is showing the depravity of that society. It's showing how bad it is. It's portrayed so badly in the book that it's like the lowest. Like, it's not just a woman. It's not just a royal woman. It's a certain time of the month. All sorts of things just to show how bad it is. Okay, this is the nadir. This is the worst that the society can reach. Even the good people can say nothing. So it is picturing that. We don't have to take it from Bhishma's point of view. We have to take it from the whole story point of view. Because mythology is done like that, fortunately or unfortunately. Like same in the Rama incident, you can't start asking the question from Sita's point of view because then the whole point is gone. Let's take an example. When Aesop gives us stories of the hare and the tortoise, we can't analyze them by saying, oh, was there a time really when hare and tortoise used to have discussions? Which language did they speak? This is one set of people. And another set of people, oh, there was never a time where such a thing happened. What a silly thing. Both these are not getting the point of the story. The point of the story is completely different. We can't change the perspective from which the author has written. So once you start seeing it, the beauty comes out when you see it from how it is written. What is that poet trying to say? So the moral of that story is society has reached lowest point. That's it. That's how it's painted. It's not a reflection on these two people.
Great. So if I might just summarize the points I believe you have made, and I hope I summarize it correctly. You're saying stories in mythology are given with a particular context. Mm-hmm. You have to understand them in that context. You can go on debating by changing the context, but whether that gives you anything fruitful is doubtful. So in that context, you look at that particular story and draw your own conclusions, which you have tried to illustrate through the story we have talked about. The second thing that has come out as a summary, because I'm trying to finish up in 5-7 minutes because Deepak said he's going to get audience questions coming, is that between the mind and the intellect, the left brain and the right brain, as it were, there is a tension. But when the right brain, the emotional brain, takes control of your actions, then you start to do silly things. In spite of being a very clever man, your left brain is underused. And so whether you call it brain damage or brain stress or whatever you want to call it, something does happen in your plastic brain. Those are the two major points that are coming out. And you're saying Vedanta fully supports this. It's actually a Vedantic point of view which psychologists are nowadays confirming. Is this a fair summary?
Yes, it is, except that left and right brain is not an exact match because in the way psychology puts it, they say that you are, something like balance and all comes from the emotional side, but intellect in Vedanta, balance comes from the intellectual side. Your intellect is able to balance all the various factors, including your own emotions, other people's emotions, all of that comes from the intellect in our classification of these things.
Well, time doesn't allow us to debate that, but I just want to mention that in all the studies that I have done, which have caused me to write the book, the Western view is exactly the opposite of the Vedantic view, which is that the age of enlightenment has made us rely too much on our left brain, the intellect, and we don't give enough play to the right brain. And the Vedantic view is, I wouldn't say the opposite, but is a bit contrarian compared to that. But let's not debate that, because that's not really the subject of our discussion. We are trying to get the Vedantic point of view. I would like to ask you a last question before we close, which is, fine, all this happens, whether it's intellect and mind, left and right, whichever way you put it. When a person gets into power, power and wealth are two things everybody seeks. Whether you become the chairman of your building cooperative society or the president of the club, forget about becoming chairman of Hindustan Lever or Tata's. People get that power goes to their head, in the club or in sort of relatively innocuous. How can they deal with this potential stress to their brain? What would be your brief prescription? I know it's in your book in some detail, but since the audience may or may not have read your book, perhaps you could just give a few bullet points, and then we'll turn it over to Deepak to conduct the audience Q&A. Go ahead.
It is just, the single most important thing is doing whatever you're doing with a cause in mind, in the spirit of what is known as yajna. Yajna means we are all working together towards some higher cause. And as long as we're able to hold that one thought, we are going to protect ourselves from any of this thing. If we don't hold that thought, you may not even be president of the club, you may be the peon in an organization, but you'll still not be able to manage it. Can you keep some vision in the work? And different people can have different visions. Everybody doesn't have to have the same vision. And based on how high that vision is, that much can you rise. Like a peon going to work, for instance, can go for only his salary, in which case he's going to fall for this thing, power and wealth. And he knows that I'm the chairman's peon, and without my saying, nobody can go, and all that goes to him. He's working for his salary. So all this becomes important. The same peon can work for the welfare of the company. The same peon doing exactly the same thing can think that, oh, this company, business is important to the country. So I am part of this business and this is really important. So I'm doing this for my country. The same person doing exactly the same work can think, this is my contribution, this is my offering to God for all that he has done to me. So, there are vast ways in which one can look at it. But as long as one looks at it in any way that crosses the boundary of my personal well-being, I'm good to go, no matter what challenges life gives me. There may be power, there may be poverty. Whatever life's challenges are, I'm going to be able to deal with it.
So, just to close it with an example, Gandhiji wanted independence for India, and he had the technology, if I may use the word, of non-violence. Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose wanted independence for India, but he said, team up with the enemy because this fellow won't go otherwise. Both of them had a cause which was much bigger than themselves. Both of them pursued it very passionately, but by different methods. From what you say, you're saying each one was a product of his context. And we cannot judge that one was right and one was wrong. Maybe one worked, one didn't work. That's a separate matter. But both of them were egoless in the pursuit of their goal, which was well above them. Is that a fair summary of what you're saying?
Yes, that is the concept of each person does his dharma, means does what he thinks is right. And as long as he sticks to that, everybody has to respect. Why don't we respect other people's opinions? If you think X and I think Y, why can't I respect that and let you be you and me be me? And
That's
also,
a wonderful, it's a very wonderful explanation of what we call social tolerance. Because you're saying, if you cannot accept that there are multiple points of view, and so long as people are putting their personal ego aside and working for a larger cause, you should be tolerant, because that's how you make a good liberal society. It's a very relevant message derived from Vedantic principles that you have told us. And I'm sure
this is what our country has stood for years and years. Even Shankaracharya, when he went about resetting Vedanta, he did it through discussion, not through the sword, not through bribing, but discussion. Let's talk about it and may the best man win. That should be the spirit.
Yeah, I read a very interesting line in alignment with what you just said, that in Buddhism, they say that we are a religion of Nithartha and Nayartha, which is very different from other religions like the Middle Eastern religions. We give you a few rules and a lot of points on which you have judgment to be expressed. Whereas they give you lots of rules with very little area for your own judgment. That's why they are very different religions. He's not commenting that one is good or bad. And what you're saying is exactly the same, that we can bring out broad principles and we must be tolerant of other people's ideas. If they're different from ours, we learn to live with it, so long as they are not driven by personal ego, greed, or harm to community. What a wonderful contribution. One, of course, expects it from a Vedantic scholar, but I'm very pleased that I could provide this. Deepak, my time is up as far as I can see, so I hand over to you now. And I hope most people would have questions for Jankiji and not for me.
There are lots of questions, in fact, that have come in, and they keep coming in. I'll start with a question which is a perfect segue for what was just being discussed about not having an ego, working for a higher cause, even ready to sacrifice oneself. This is a question for both of you because it has elements of the corporate world and elements in society. Mayuri from the YouTube channel has asked, what are your views on someone who calls out wrongdoers, whether it be a corporate whistleblower or someone in society, and is then penalized by society for speaking out? So I guess the spirit of the question is someone did something beyond themselves but got penalized, whether it be in the corporate world or whether it be larger for society. Your views, please. Maybe we start with you, Gopal, and then we'll take Jankiji's views.
Well, it's Jankiji's show. I'm an accessory. But anyway, since you said at this time, I'll start. I believe that speaking up is very tough. It requires great character and courage to be able to speak up as a whistleblower or as a person who differs with your boss or who stands up for a principle. It's very easy to sit and give a lecture that everybody should express his view and should tell the boss he's wrong. But the power gap between leaders and their people or their praja, there's a big noise at the back. What's happening? Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Can hear you.
Okay. But the big power gap between leadership and therefore I think there's a skill involved here, which is learn to disagree without becoming disagreeable. And that's a skill that is lacking in many communities, including Indians. Then how can I disagree without being disagreeable? And I would close by taking the example of Vibhishana in the Ramayana. When Ravan wanted to put an end to Hanuman's life for the damage that he had caused to Lanka, the only person who spoke up was Vibhishana. And he did it in a particular manner which Valmiki has described in his Ramayana. And that is the skill that you have to learn. I have great admiration for people who blow the whistle, even if they turn out to be wrong, so long as they have not done it with a mischievous angle. Jankiji, over to you.
No, basically, exactly what you really said. I just put it in the Vedantic language. The capacity to stand up and speak the truth when others are not doing it is a sign, as Gopalji said, of character. It is a sign of unselfishness. However, the capacity to choose the time, the place, the person with which you do this is a thing for your intellect to decide. The intellect must be able to find ways by which we can communicate our point of view to others without upsetting the apple cart, as it were. There will be some conditions under which it is not possible. This is just not going to be possible. Then it is a call that the individual will take on whether they are going to sacrifice their life on this or not. See somebody like Christ. He said, okay, I'm taking this call. I'm doing this. Socrates, he took the call. I'm doing this. Okay, so some people did that. Some people were in a more happy situation where they could have said whatever they wanted to and said it in a way that was pleasant. So in the Bhagavad Gita, it tells us what is the right way to speak. So he talks about it and he says, Anudvegakaram vakyam. Satyam, true. Priyam means dear. Means it should sound nice to the person you're speaking to. It should not sound horrible to that person. And hitam, it is in the welfare of the person and the welfare of the situation. So what are the three characteristics of good speech? Is it has to be true. It has to be tactfully said. Hitam, priyam. It should sound, somebody asks you, do you like my new dress? You don't say, no, it's awful, I hate it. That is just hurting a person unnecessarily, right? So you can find something, I like the color or whatever you want to say about it. And it must be hitam, it must be in the welfare. And it must not come anudvegakaram vakyam. The vakyam, the speech should not come out of impulse. I see something, I get angry and I say it. No, not like that. It's a well-considered thought. You've considered the truth quality, the dearness quality, and the beneficial element of this. And then after you've done all this, then let the chips fall where they may.
Thank you. This might be a ideal time to say that exactly this answer is one of the videos on Jankiji's YouTube channel. So we'll talk about it later once we finish the Q&A. There are two questions which are very related to each other, and Jankiji, they are related to the answers that you gave. The first one is from Harshiv from the YouTube channel, who asks, how does one know that the desires they have are not healthy? And the second one is related. Anuradha again from YouTube asks, if desires are a source of negative behavior, should we then not have any desires?
How do you know whether desires are healthy or not is a matter for your intellect to decide. You have to decide for yourself whether a particular desire is something which you wish to entertain or not. If your answer is yes, then you make it your goal and you figure out a plan of action to reach it. This kind of discriminate behavior with desires does not allow them to modify into these negative things. So that answers the second question, that when we apply our intellect to the desire and we say, okay, this is what I want, this is when I want it, then I figure out how to go about getting whatever it is that I have wanted. And I've thought that this is something worth my pursuing and pursued it with my intellect, then it will not create any negativity. But if I just go berserk, I want X or Y, Z, and I start going berserk about it, then of all these other things will come out of it. So how to deal with desires is one of the biggest things of a human life. And actually Vedantic study is meant for that, to teach us how to deal with desires. Because the fact is we have them. We all have them. The only people who don't have them are men and women of enlightenment. So when you are a realized soul, desires are zero. But up to that point, every one of us has desires. So we must learn how to deal with them and direct our personalities and our life to a positive end rather than allowing our desires to run us into a ditch, which is what is happening most of the time. It every level of the personality. I mean, even things like lifestyle ailments. These are our desires driving us into a ditch. Like, why? Everybody's got lifestyle ailments, so why do we have them? Our desires are pushing us. Why is it that there are so many crashes? Why do businesses fail? Why do all this thing, why are there all these defaulters running helter-skelter? Like, you're running a great company. Now, why are you sitting in a foreign country, just trying to escape extradition or something? Like, why? Like, you could have lived such a comfortable, good life. Why those complications? Desires are driving us all into the ditch, and we don't know it. Like Gopalji had said, this is one thing that we are not able to see what's driving us. What are those hidden persuaders driving us and wrecking our lives, our beautiful, wonderful lives? Imagine we have such a great opportunity. We can have so much fun. We can enjoy our lives. We can do so many great things. We can be so productive. We can achieve so much for ourselves, for others. Instead of doing all this lovely, great stuff, we go and mess things up. So how do you avoid that? Your intellect, your capacity of discrimination, reason, judgment should be able to apply itself to the desires and drive them. The desire should not drive us. Our intellect should drive us.
Thank you, Jankiji. There is a question that came from Nishit again from YouTube, refers to the discussion that was had earlier. And he says, today we say that with power comes responsibilities. And Jankiji, you mentioned about our culture uh, looking at responsibility foremost. His question is, but we have seen that majorly all those who have power, they also have maximum corruption. So how does one reconcile and deal with this situation?
Uh, we deal with them with sympathy, I think. If you have power and you're using that power for corrupt purposes, very sorry for you, because you are not going to be able to sleep at night. You're going to have all the facilities, the amenities, all that, but you're going to lose the power to enjoy them. So, sympathy is to such a person. What we have to learn from it is, I'm not going there. That's not the life I want for myself. And second thing I have to do is protect myself from these people who have obviously lost their heads. So we cannot determine what other people have to do, but we certainly can protect ourselves from the consequences of their behavior. Like my father used to always tell me, that a good driver is not one who drives well, but one who drives well and looks out for the mistakes of others. So when our intellect is working, we not only do things properly ourselves, we protect ourselves from the rashness, let's say, of others. So if they are in power and they are not utilizing them well, we've understood, right? We understood the mechanism. What has happened? The desire is driving them. When the desire is driving you, what's the result? You're highly agitated. When you're highly agitated, what are you doing? You're going to make mistake after mistake. You're running your life into a ditch. I'm sorry for you. If I can help you, I'd be happy to. But while I can't, I will protect myself from this nonsense. How do you reconcile? I don't know what exactly you mean reconcile, but if you understood the mechanism of why people function like that, then well, that's it. It's cause and effect relationship.
Thank you, Jankiji. There is a question that came basis the reference that we had on Ramayana and Mahabharata. And Shankar Prasad is asking, in a way, that we refer to them as mythologies. Are they mythologies or did that happen in history? So the question is, do we learn from the history or from the mythology of Ramayana and Mahabharata?
It's a good question because it brings to light a very important aspect, which is that each subject deals with its own field. A philosopher deals with philosophy. When a philosopher reads a text, they read it from the perspective of learning philosophical lessons. Okay, so you can ask them questions about the philosophy in the text. If you wish to know whether a text is a historical text, you have to take your question to a historian, because now that's a different field of study. The philosopher is not concerned with whether it is true or false. The philosopher is concerned with what is it teaching. This is what the philosopher will do. The historian is concerned with what really happened. So this question has to be addressed to them. Now try and understand what's going on here. It's a bit like Shakespeare writing Julius Caesar. When we read Shakespeare's Julius Caesar, we don't read it for history. We read it for maybe the beauty of Shakespeare's language. Maybe we want to learn the philosophy of what he's trying to tell us. It's not a historical lesson. It's not meant to be a historical lesson. It's a drama. Okay? So yes, there may be nuggets of truth in it. There may be, it is, the broad, the things are correct that the conspirators got together and murdered Julius Caesar. Broadly, it is correct. But now every dialogue, everything, Shakespeare's not telling us history. He's telling us something else. So if we are looking at it from a philosophical point of view, we are finding that something else. The historian is going to look for other things. That is his field. So whether Ramayana, Mahabharata happened or not is not a question for philosophy. It's a question for history. Let them tell us. We don't have to have an opinion on a matter that is not our field of study. They will tell us. They'll do their study. They will do their R&D. They will do their research, and they will let us know how much of it was true, how much is false. That's their business, not our business.
There's a question on YouTube from Aditi, who's asking, basis the earlier response on standing up for what is right. Her question is, if one knows that powerful people, when you stand up to them, you get killed or proven guilty, how far can one go to speaking truth if one sees that one has less powers and it may even lead to one's death?
That's a call you take. How can anyone answer that question for you? That's a call every human being has to take. What is dharma for me here is a call we all have to take. There are plenty of things in this world that are wrong, and each one of us can decide to handle something. None of us can handle everything. So we do what we can, and each one is dedicated to whatever they are dedicated to. So it is a very private and a very personal, a very individualistic decision. What is my dharma? What is right for me to do? What should I work for or not work for? What should I sacrifice for or not sacrifice for? I must apply my own intellect and figure that out for myself. Nobody can answer that question. This is my life, it is my decision, and I bear the repercussions of the decisions I take. So Vedanta is not a subject that tells you what to do or not to do. Vedanta gives the laws of cause and effect, such as selfishness causes agitations. Law. Now, what you want to do with that law is your business. World means change. Law. What you want to do with that is your business. So education means learning these principles. Developing an intellect means using these principles and applying them to the situation that each individual is. Each of us are in different situations. And we must, knowing Vedantic laws, apply our intellect to decide what is right or wrong in this particular situation. So it is entirely a personal decision whether you want to speak up, don't want to speak up, whether this is a war you're going to or you're not going to.
We have a question where we could have both points of view now, including the corporate point of view from Gopal. The question relates to that if it's a for-profit company which has shareholders who are putting in the money to make more money, how can one even consider having an unselfish motive when there are shareholders who are funding the company? So, Gopal, let's start with you, then we'll come to Jankiji in terms of in the corporate world, how could one be unselfish and when there is a profit motive attached to it?
Well, my experience is that it is possible to be unselfish with a profit motive. It depends on what you do with the profit. So for every $100 or 100 rupees that Tata's earned, for example, a large part, 40 to 50% goes to charity. And I've spent my career, the latter part of my career in Tata's, being a professional manager, earning, saving cost, making an extra rupee so that 40, 50 paise can go for charity. My first company, Levers, was about the same. So, I don't believe that these are two connected things. They are only connected in the minds of selfish people. I hope that is, may or may not agree with it, but I believe that what you do with the profit, it's like saying, what's wrong in earning profit? It's the oxygen. You're breathing in oxygen. Please don't breathe out carbon dioxide. That's not an argument. They are not connected. So to me, they are two different things. I don't want to take too much time. I would like Jankiji to have her share of voice. But I don't see this as an issue at all. But I do see it in the larger corporate arena as a problem. I have been fortunate that in the two companies I have worked, It has not been a problem. It has never been a conflict for me for 50 years. Jankiji.
It is, I think we have to take a step back from this, maybe go back, go behind in the question a bit. Business for a country is very important, okay? Because if businesses didn't run, the country would not progress. I don't know why we have this feeling that a business thing is a bad thing. We would be poverty stricken if there weren't be businesses. So businesses are doing a great service to our nation. They're taking our nation out. They're giving employment. They're doing great stuff. So our whole country will go up. They're all wanting GDP to go up. They're all wanting all this to happen, right? How does this happen? It doesn't happen because Vedanta scholars sit down and study Vedanta. It happens because businesses go out there and do all that stuff. So it's a wonderful thing. So to think that business is basically profit motive is itself not maybe ideal. Business is country building, is nation building. And profit for a country, just like Gopalji said, is like oxygen. If there was no profit, the business cannot run. It's an inefficient business that doesn't have profit. And it's an efficient business that has more profit. And so these are all good things. To have profit is good. To have losses is bad. These are all good things. But the business itself is meant for nation building, right? Why was Jamshedpur set up? Because there was steel, we can do something in this country, or we can't. If there are no stores, no shops, where do we buy our food from? So we can't survive without businesses. So why is business looked upon as purely profit motive? It's not. Profit is the oxygen. Obviously, to run the business, you have to have profit. Otherwise, how is the business supposed to run? It will close down. But the business is such that it is of great value to us. It is when the businesses start treating the business as if the profit is the single most important thing, that's when the problem starts. Otherwise, profit is great, large profits is even greater, and big business is wonderful. It's going to build up our nation, and it's a great service to people. Because I don't know if you remember those times. I don't know how old you are, but there was a time where if you wanted a telephone, you had to wait years. If you wanted a gas connection, you have to wait years. It was a madhouse it was, like, why are we living like this? This is great. Now, we can't go out, but we have all our needs met. Isn't that great? Who's meeting our needs? The businesses are meeting our needs. So businesses are service centers. They are not, when they are treated as if the only thing a business does is earn profit, that's when the problem starts. Otherwise, they are a nation building. They are serving all of us. And thank God that these businesses are working. Otherwise, we can't sit at home. We can do this program because some business is working. So there's nothing wrong in all this thing. It's all good things. I don't know if that makes sense.
I think it makes a lot of sense. I always think that society, any progressive society in history, has had 3 E's, the letter E. The first is enterprise. And I think I would have spoken to it, but Jankiji has explained its role extremely well. I don't need to speak further. The second is education. And education is used in a very broad sense, cultural development, health. It's not primary education or secondary education. You need to promote arts, crafts, music, dance. And if you look at history, it was the kings and the people, the zamindars, who promoted these. These will lead to what the Greeks called eudaimonia. Eudaimonia is a feeling of well-being. When you can indulge in Vedantic thought, you need the enterprise to provide the petrol for the engine. You need education as a gearbox to direct the engine in the car in the right places. And you need eudaimonia as a pleasure of driving. If these are out of balance, then you have a homeopathic problem. And I think the key point is they should not be out of balance. Just like if you put a Ferrari engine into a Maruti Suzuki car, it's not going to be a nice car in spite of having the best engine in the world. So I think I fully agree with Jankiji. I'm expressing it in business language. She expressed it in Vedantic language.
On this note, thank you so much to both of you. There have been lots of questions that have come up in the last 10 minutes. Probably we could have gone 1 more hour with all those questions. But it's
Oh,
good to
then why
see all
don't
the interest.
we can have a question answer session some other time, and people can come to the classes also and ask their questions.
Yes, and on the note of having petrol and knowledge both, so thank you for providing us the petrol and the knowledge this evening. Thank you, Jankiji. Thank you, Gopalji. There are a few announcements, if you would indulge us for a couple of minutes. So, for all those who want to have such invigorating discussions and classes, we have a series of resources for you. The best one during this lockdown are our online classes. The details are on the screen. Towards the end of all the display, we will have a number which you can note and stay in touch to get to know all the classes. Jankiji's classes are on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. There are different texts which are being studied through these classes. They are at different times, so you can join any of these classes. The classes are also interactive, they're held on Zoom. So you have an opportunity to get the fuel, get the knowledge, and also ask your questions during those classes. There is a class 7 to 8 p.m. And more details can be provided once you join the mailing list. There'll be a number there that you can go on to. We can run through the classes relatively quickly. There's a class on Friday on the Bhagavad Gita. There is a class on Saturday which studies the text by Swami Parthasarathi Vedanta treatise. And then there is a class again on Sunday morning on the Bhagavad Gita. They all have the same Zoom link. So once you get that link, you can join any of these classes. Jankiji also has a YouTube channel, Team Janki Santok. A lot of people have logged in through that channel. It has more than 150 videos and counting. There are 1 hour videos, there are short videos. You can search the videos, and chances are any question that you have, you'll probably find an answer on that channel. Jankiji's book is available both as a Kindle version and a hard copy version. How do you know what you know? Again, once there is the ease of getting physical movement, you could also write into us to get a physical copy. Till then, we are beneficiaries of Amazon and Kindle, and you can order your book. And we have a series of such conversations coming up. You may want to call them friends of Vedanta, as Gopal used the term of him being a friend of Vedanta. And we have a talk coming up with Mr. Shashi Tharoor. We'll keep you updated on that conversation. So join our mailing list. There is a WhatsApp group that you could join. And on the next page is the contact number that may be important for you to take note of for that. So thank you, everyone. Our point of contact is Bharat, and that's his number. Please write to him. He's very responsive, and you would get all the resources to stay connected with this knowledge. And like we said in the last answer, provide you the petrol to get all the knowledge that you're seeking. Thank you to everyone who joined, and thank you, Gopalji. Thank you, Jankiji.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I'll wish
Thank
you a
you to the whole
happy
team.
Vedantic Sunday.
Thank you. Thank you to the whole team who's worked so hard and put this whole thing up. It's wonderful. All of you guys have done a great job.
Thank you.